So we've been talking about Mangekyou Sharingan a lot on this page recently. We've covered everything from how they work to why we theorize certain people awoke different abilities. But by far the most popular thing we've talked about as it pertains to the Mangekyou Sharingan is what we believe certain people whose MS abilities we never saw had for MS abilities. And the people we've talked about thus far were Sarada and Madara. However, hypothesizing what Sarada and Madara's abilities are is relatively simple comparatively to what we're trying to accomplish today. See, hypothesizing what Madara's MS abilities are is kind of easy, because we've seen Madara fight, like, a lot. And we already know the extent of the ability of things like the Rinnegan and other things in Madara's kit. Therefore, any abilities that Madara have that don't appear to fall under the umbrella of a Rinnegan or being Edo Tensei or just being a Kage level threat, we can appoint to his Mangekyou Sharingan, which is how we were able to, through reverse deduction, figure out that his Mangekyou Sharingan allows him to see through shadow clones. That is to say, he's able to identify what shadow clones are shadow clones, something that nobody else can do. And since this is something that nobody else can do, even other wielders of the Rinnegan and people with powers comparable to his, we can therefore draw the connection between that ability and his MS, something that he and only he had. Sarada is also substantially easier than the person we're going to be talking about today, because we have also seen her fight, but we haven't seen her MS yet. But we're going to know what Sarada's MS abilities are in probably the next couple of chapters, if we're being real. So even if what we hypothesized about was incorrect, at least we'll know we were incorrect. But at the very least, we can draw a hypothesis because we know that the MS is a reflection of the user's soul. Specifically, it's a reflection of the user's soul at the moment they awaken their MS. And we were there for both Madara and Sarada's. But the person we're talking about today, not only have we never seen fight, but we also weren't there when they awoke their MS. In fact, the sheer existence of their MS is slightly controversial. Yes, that's right. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we are talking about one of the most hotly debated, yet least informed topics in the entirety of Naruto, the Wicked Eye Fugaku, and more specifically, what his MS abilities might have been. See, we know next to nothing about Fugaku. We know he was Itachi and Sasuke's dad, we know he was the head of the Uchiha clan, we know he had a run on site order, and we know he was referred to as the Wicked Eye Fugaku. But that's pretty much it. Extrapolating with this small amount of information what his MS abilities might have been is next to impossible. But next to impossible is what I live for. And I genuinely believe that we have more than enough information to make a definitive guess on what his abilities might have been. And you know what they say, an informed hypothesis is pretty much as good as an answer. No one says that, I just made it up. Still words to live by though. Which means today, ladies and gentlemen, we are talking Fugaku's MS abilities revealed. But before we get to revealing anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you like the idea of me revealing things in anime, you're gonna love my other channel where I reveal things from all kinds of anime that aren't called Naruto or Boruto. Or if you just like the idea of me talking about anime, you're gonna love my anime podcast that I do with Danny Mata called Otaku's Anonymous, where me and Danny break down everything that happened in anime this week. It's available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Before we get into all that, guys, today we're gonna talk about one of our favorite recurring sponsors to the page, HelloFresh. Are you looking for ways to save money this spring? Well, HelloFresh is cheaper than grocery shopping and 25% cheaper than takeout. Not to mention the fact that good food is not worth wasting. HelloFresh pre-portioned ingredients cut down on food waste by 23% when compared to traditional grocery shopping, which is not only good for you, but good for the planet. And speaking of being good for the planet, did you know that HelloFresh is technically better for the planet than traditional grocery shopping? On average, HelloFresh meals have a 31% lower carbon footprint than the same meals made from ingredients from the grocery store. And if you're worried you don't have the expertise to cook yourself dinner every single night, trust me, HelloFresh meals are not only delicious, but incredibly simple to cook. With pre-portioned ingredients and step-by-step instruction, cooking a HelloFresh meal is as simple as it gets. Not to mention that HelloFresh offers a myriad of quick, healthy, and easy to cook dinners. I actually started HelloFresh when I was in college, and when I started, I was 205 pounds. With the help of the macro tracking and the calorie counting that HelloFresh allowed me to do, I lost over 50 pounds. Not to mention, over the course of these last 5 years I've been cooking with HelloFresh, it has made me into a significantly better cook. Somebody who's not only competent in the kitchen, but somebody who loves to cook for others. Let me show you how good of a cook HelloFresh has made me. So it's AAPI Awareness Month, and HelloFresh is dedicated to not only uplifting Asian culture, but also spreading the great news about their delicious dishes. So today, we're making some chicken curry. Little oil in the pan. Cooking with fire now. It's all in the flick of the wrist. You better believe I could not flip it
this good when I first started. I gotta say, this is starting to look really good. But now for the real test, the taste test. Oh! I am a good cook!
So what are you guys waiting for? Go to HelloFresh.com and use code 16NCHammer23 or go to the link in my description for 16 free meals and free shipping. Yes, that's right, 16NCHammer23 for 16 free meals and free shipping. Let's all get in our training arc with HelloFresh. So Fugaku, the father of two of the strongest Uchihas in the 1,000 years of the Uchiha lineage, holder of one of the coolest nicknames in the entirety of Naruto, Wicked Eye Fugaku, and the last real head of the Uchiha clan. When it comes to the ratio of intrigue around a character and the amount of information we have about that character, the only person that Fugaku comes in second to is probably Sakumo Hatake, maybe Ashina Uzumaki. But what if I told you that we have enough information about Fugaku? Well, obviously it would be nice to know more about him. He was an incredibly cool and badass character with an interesting backstory that ended in a terrible way, at least as it pertains to figuring out what his MS abilities were. I think we have enough information. But like I stated earlier, the sheer existence of Fugaku's MS is actually a point of controversy. See, Fugaku's MS is technically anime only. That is to say that it's only ever appeared physically in the anime. See, in the anime during the filler episode, Itachi and Fugaku were in the basement of the Uchiha compound, which is where the stone tablet resides. It's at this point that Fugaku reveals to Itachi that if you look at the stone tablet through the eyes of a Mangekyou Sharingan, you see more information. And it's at this point that Fugaku flashes his MS and tells Itachi that with the power of this MS, he can control the Nine Tails. However, he purposely keeps this information on wraps because if the entire clan knew about it, they would kidnap Naruto and force him to put Kurama under genjutsu to rage out in the middle of Konoha, thus ensuring that the Uchiha coup was successful, but maximizing the amount of casualties possible. And technically, while this is a filler episode, and therefore people will argue with its canonicity, the information being given is 100% canon. If somebody looks at the stone tablet through the eyes of a Mangekyou Sharingan, the information that they can control a tailed beast with the use of an MS is confirmed. We know this because this is how Madara confers this information to Obito after reading it from the stone tablet himself, and Itachi later confers this information to Sasuke in a canon episode. So Fugaku revealing this information to Itachi in a filler episode isn't crazy. The only other circumstance would be Itachi activates his MS while looking at the stone tablet and reads the information for himself, which is absolutely a possibility, but when given information that doesn't contradict the manga canon in filler episodes, why not take it as fact? On top of this isn't even the only time that Fugaku is stated to be able to control Kurama. As on the night of Kurama's rampage when Naruto was born, Fugaku was specifically told to escort civilians to safety to keep him away from Kurama, as Hiruzen and Danzo believed there was a possibility he or another Uchiha, admittedly, could be controlling Kurama. And I can't find the direct manga chapter or scan, but I do believe that Fugaku states that if he had gone to the border, he would have been able to suppress Kurama with the use of his Sharingan. But I could be making that up. But considering the fact that we have an actual reveal of the Mangekyou Sharingan in a filler episode that doesn't contradict any manga canon, an actual manga canon confirmation that Hiruzen and Danzo were afraid that Fugaku or possibly another Uchiha was controlling Kurama, and let's be real, Fugaku was the head of the Uchiha and is therefore supposed to be the strongest amongst the Uchiha, so they were probably most likely afraid of Fugaku, and a possible passing comment from Fugaku that he would have been able to control Kurama in order to reduce the amount of damage on the night of Naruto's birth that I cannot find. Now, genuinely, the only real argument for Fugaku not having an MS in the first place is that Itachi didn't take his after killing him, which would have made a lot of sense. If Itachi had taken Fugaku's eyes, he would have had EMS. And even though Itachi did have a chakra illness that was going to kill him earlier than he should have died anyways, the overusage of his MS also accelerated the timeline on his death. Therefore, if Itachi had taken Fugaku's possible MS eyes and awoken EMS, he would have lived for longer. So why didn't Itachi take Fugaku's eyes? Well, there's two camps. Those who believe that Fugaku didn't have an MS to take in the first place, and those who believe that either Itachi didn't know at the time that if he took Fugaku's eyes, he could awaken an EMS, or just those who think he was a 13-year-old who had just assassinated his entire clan and powering up wasn't at the front of his mind. I tend to side with the latter camp, because here's my thing. There is a clear and evident fear in Konoha that somebody within the Uchiha, most likely Fugaku, is able to control Kurama. And to me, at least, you don't achieve the name Wicked Eye Fugaku with a 3-tome. And ironically, that nickname is pretty much our biggest hint at Fugaku's MS from the manga, as the name Wicked Eye Fugaku denotes somebody with serious dojutsu abilities. And what are the abilities of a 3-tome Sharingan? Being able to move faster, perceive things, copy movements, and a little bit of genjutsu? It's nothing particularly wicked, especially when considering the fact that during Fugaku's time, there was hundreds of people with 3-tome Sharingan, and he was the only one with a nickname. And it's hard to get a nickname in Konoha. Only Sakumo, Minato, and Fugaku ever got one. That's not true. Also, Hiruzen got one, but that still kind of proves my point. Oh, and Hashirama. Still bolstering. Oh, and Shisui. Okay, I will admit, the whole idea that not a lot of people get nicknames is kind of falling apart, but the only people who do get nicknames are very powerful. But where does the name Wicked Eye Fugaku really come from? Well, I believe the answer lies in his MS abilities. So we should get to talking about those probably. So what do we know? We know that the MS is a reflection of the soul of the user at the time that they awoke their MS. And if we're taking the filler episode where we see Fugaku's MS for the first time as canon, then we'll know that he awoke his MS during the Third Great Shinobi World War upon seeing all of his comrades die. More specifically, when one of his comrades gave their life to save him. And while most people will build an idea of what his MS abilities are based on the fact that he didn't want the Uchiha to be oppressed by Konoha, if he awoke his MS during the Third Great Shinobi World War, the Uchiha weren't nearly as oppressed as they were later on. See, I'm not saying the circumstance for the Uchiha was great during or before the Third Great Shinobi World War. I mean, it's actually kind of a hotly debated topic in itself. We know, at least during the Third Great Shinobi World War, that the Uchiha were still living amongst everybody else in Konoha. It wasn't until Naruto's birth and the release of Kurama that they were moved to the Uchiha compound, which was on the outskirts of the village near the police headquarters. And while the Uchiha had perceived plights against them for decades, basically ever since Madara left, them being uprooted from all across Konoha and being compartmentalized into one area on the outskirts of the village after Kurama was released through suspicions that they were the ones who released him, was pretty much what lit the flame to boil the pot that was Uchiha descent. So to extrapolate what we thought Fugaku's MS abilities were based on the idea that he was worried about the Uchihas being oppressed during the Third Great Shinobi World War, it's a bit of a stretch, as I don't think the oppression of the Uchihas was the thing at the front of his mind while battling against other villages. As more likely than not, during the Third Great Shinobi World War, he was battling shoulder to shoulder with everybody from Konoha. And while a couple of Uchihas might have been clustered together in a group because obviously Fugaku's best friend was close enough to save him during the war, I think if history has ever made anything clear, it's that war makes the nation under the war usually a lot closer. An external enemy to point your hatred at usually makes sure you don't point your hatred at anybody within your country. It's not great, and it's a very much imperfect system, but it's why things like American news outlets make sure you're always afraid of big and scary countries like Russia and China, so we don't start doing this. And to assume that the circumstances were similar for the Third Great Shinobi World War isn't crazy, because the Third Great Shinobi World War was the bloodiest and longest out of all of the world wars, and it was also pretty much everybody versus Konoha, which means there really wasn't much as it pertains to time to oppress the Uchiha, as the Hidden Mist, Hidden Sand, Hidden Stone, and Hidden Lightning all had to be defeated. However, I'm not saying we don't consider any hatred towards Konoha in this moment when Fugaku awakens his MS. As like I've already said, the Uchiha have been upset with Konoha for as long as they've existed. It's the cycle of hatred. Madara was the first to espouse these ideas, and it got to such a point where he himself had to separate himself from Konoha. Now, the reason that I say it's likely that he had even a little bit of hatred towards Konoha is because one of his MS abilities is rather obvious. See, it's never explicitly been stated that MS abilities are passed down through families. However, both Itachi and Sasuke had Amaterasu. Shisui stated that his grandfather Kagami had a genjutsu greater than his, which leads us to believe that Kagami also had Kodo Matsukame, but maybe at a greater level. And therefore, there is a slight track record of MS abilities being passed down through families. And considering the fact that both of Fugaku's sons got Amaterasu, it makes it kind of obvious to assume that Fugaku most likely had Amaterasu in at least one of his eyes. Logically, it just makes sense. And most likely he manifested Amaterasu to burn away the lies of Konoha, much in a similar capacity to Sasuke and Itachi, who were all greatly affected by the hatred between the Uchiha and Konoha. However, if Itachi wanted to burn away the lies of both sides, and Sasuke wanted to burn around everything and rise from the ashes, Fugaku simply wanted to burn away the lies of Konoha. See, Fugaku wasn't even actually all that interested in the coup. This is why he kept his MS abilities on wraps. He understood if he released them that they would use Naruto, and most likely the coup would win, but would be incredibly deadly. But we know through Itachi's light novels that he was being pushed into a situation that was forcing him to be the head of the coup. And as the current strongest member of the Uchiha and as the head of the Uchiha, he needed to be stern in his want for the coup in order to spurn everybody in the Uchiha clan to move forward with it. At least this was the ideology of those around him, encouraging him to radicalize the Uchiha into the coup. And even though during the Third Great Shinobi World War, Fugaku's hatred for Konoha probably wasn't nearly as high as it got in his lifetime, the sight of seeing his Uchiha brethren die in war for Konoha, even though they were suppressing his clan, was probably a little bit aggravating. And therefore, manifesting an ability that's symbolic of burning away the lies of Konoha, the people who had kept his clan in a low down place for decades now, is not the craziest thing of all time, especially once again when you take into account the fact that both of his sons had Amaterasu. And while obviously Amaterasu alone could be good enough to give him the moniker of the Wicked Eye Fugaku, if that was all it takes, why wasn't Itachi Wicked Eye Itachi? Why wasn't Sasuke Wicked Eye Sasuke? I truly believe that the reason he got the name Wicked Eye Fugaku actually comes from his other MS ability. See, a lot of people believe that because he was given the moniker the Wicked Eye Fugaku, that his other MS ability was genjutsu based, which leads a lot of other people to believe that his other MS ability is Tsukiyomi. I mean, if he's gonna have an ocular based genjutsu, wouldn't it be Tsukiyomi? I mean, that's what Itachi got, and we see some paternal lineage to the abilities here. And honestly, Tsukiyomi for Fugaku makes a little bit of sense. I mean, think about it. Tsukiyomi is pretty wicked. I mean, with the powers of Tsukiyomi, you are able to completely control somebody's perception of reality. You can dilate time to a degree where you can torture somebody for 72 hours in a second, or show somebody their entire lives by placing them under genjutsu. These are both things that we saw Itachi do. And while obviously Itachi showing his girlfriend the entirety of their lives together is cool and cute, considering what Itachi is able to do with Tsukiyomi, the fact that he can dilate time to a point where he can show somebody their entire lives, 60 or 70 years, in a matter of a couple of seconds, he basically becomes the god of their universe, because you live out an entire life in the realm of Tsukiyomi, an entire life that Itachi creates. And for a long time, we believed he was only able to stretch this time for 72 hours of intense torture. In the second of his light novels, we realized there's really no upper limit, meaning anybody placed in Tsukiyomi could possibly have to spend 50 or 60 years getting tortured by Itachi if he wanted to. It's widely believed the reason he keeps it to 72 hours is because 72 hours is more than enough to break anyone's brain. As Kakashi, one of the stronger and more genjutsu resistant ninja in the entirety of Konoha, got broken down by this technique. And the fact that the technique was so wicked and so strong that it was able to put Kakashi, one of the more mentally resilient people in the entirety of the manga, in a coma, speaks to the sheer strength of Tsukiyomi. It's why I actually believe Tsukiyomi is a stronger genjutsu than Kodo Matsukame, but you're not ready for that conversation yet. And honestly, Tsukiyomi also kind of aligns with Fugaku's values, as Fugaku, somewhat similarly to Itachi, was stuck between two perceptions of reality. He, by day, had to be the head of the Uchiha clan and show face in Konoha to prove that the Uchiha were upright and needed there, while by candlelight at night was planning a coup to overthrow the Konoha government. And this line of thinking is slightly bolstered by what we learned about Fugaku in Itachi's light novels, that he was essentially suckered into being the face of the coup by those who wanted the Uchiha to rise up above Konoha, but didn't have the staying power or the charisma to make sure all of the Uchiha would move towards that goal. And therefore, Fugaku, in another sense, was stuck between two different perceptions of reality. His want as the clan leader to make sure that the Uchiha were protected, and his want as the clan leader to make sure that the Uchiha weren't oppressed. But to call this separate perceptions of reality, to me at least, feels like a bit of a stretch. See, the reason it works so well with Itachi is because Itachi understood the ideologies of both sides. Itachi was one of the only people in Konoha with an objectively true viewpoint of what was going on between Konoha and the Uchiha, as he was having conversations with the higher-ups of both sides. And because of this, Itachi knew the objective reality of the situation. And because he knew the objective reality of the situation, he was able to see how the perceptions of that reality differed between people on opposing sides. And while one could argue that Fugaku was in a similar circumstance, as he understood, at least so far as it went in the Uchiha clan, the oppression of Konoha, but was stuck between those who wanted to make sure that as many Uchihas lived as possible and those who wanted to initiate the coup. But that feels hollow narratively comparatively to Itachi's reasoning. And on top of this, like we've already stated, he awoke his MS during the Third Great Shinobi World War, and therefore activating the coup and him being suckered into being the face of the coup really weren't at the front of his brain. And therefore, what we know about Fugaku and what we know about the MS, in that it's a reflection of what you're feeling at that current moment, I don't believe Fugaku was dealing with a dichotomy moment as it pertains to the Uchiha coup. I do, however, believe he was dealing with a dichotomy of something else. See, we all understand that all of the abilities of the MS are named after Japanese gods, be they either Shinto gods or the gods of Hokkaido. And ironically, there's a Shinto deity who hasn't yet been used for an MS ability name, who I really think probably should be. See, all in all, there isn't that many Japanese deities. There's Izanagi and Izanami, who created all the other gods, Amaterasu, Tsukiyomi, Susanoo, Kagutsuchi, Ame no Uzume, and all of those gods are some of the most important gods in Shinto lore. The goddess of dawn and revelry, the goddess of the sun, the god of the moon, the god of storm, the two progenitor gods. But did you know that there's a Japanese god of war, who ironically has never been used for an MS ability in a clan built on war, in a clan built on the cycle of hatred, where an MS is almost always awoken outside of the one circumstance of Sarada through intense hatred or grief, most of which usually occur during war times. And this Japanese god of war is actually one of the 7 lucky gods of Japan, and his name is Bishamonten, or just Bishamon. And Bishamon's role amongst the gods of Japan is to be the god of fortunate soldiers and guards. Guards like police or night watchmen. As in Buddhist and Shinto mythology, this is basically what Bishamon is. And you know what Fugaku was? Not only a soldier, but also a guard. See, for those of you who have been paying attention, the Uchiha were placed in charge of the Konoha police force by Tobirama. Some make the argument that Tobirama made them all police because the police headquarters was on the outskirts of the village, and therefore if they lived on the outskirts of the village and were in a low-ranking position like a policeman, they would never rise to the top of the ranks and become a Hokage, while others, me, make the argument that Tobirama, an incredibly pragmatic and realistic person, realized that the people who wielded an ocular genjutsu that would be able to shut down any ninja criminal without major destruction to the surroundings would probably make really good police. I mean, yeah, I could absolutely blast away that criminal who just stole your purse with a fireball jutsu, but it's gonna destroy the ramen shop next to where he's standing. And if hypothetically he tries to take somebody hostage, I can just look him in the eyes and make his body turn into goo, shutting down what could be a dangerous criminal in a non-violent and non-destructive manner. But enough about Tobirama. The real point we're driving at here is that Fugaku, as the head of the Uchiha, was also the head of the police. So not only was he in charge of a group of warriors during the Third Great Shinobi World War, but he was also in charge of the guards of Konoha, making him, in essence, the king of warriors and guards. On top of this, Bishamon in Japanese mythology is also the punisher of criminals, kind of like a policeman. See, Bishamon in Buddhism is actually the protector of the temple where Buddha preaches, as well as the protector of the divine treasure house. And the connections between that and Fugaku are rather obvious, as Fugaku is the protector of the Uchiha. You could even go so far as to extrapolate that the protection of the temple where Buddha preaches is actually in reference to him protecting the Uchiha compound. And Fugaku manifesting an ability named after Bishamon makes a lot of sense, because the reason he manifested this ability in the first place is because somebody else protected him from death, and therefore he awoke his MS because he was losing his brethren on the battlefield of the Third Great Shinobi World War when he was supposed to be the ones protecting them, and therefore he would manifest an ability that would allow him to protect the Uchiha from both war and the coup. See, I don't know how many times I can hammer home the fact here that Fugaku didn't actually want the coup to happen. Fugaku, more than anything, was concerned about the amount of devastation that a coup would bring to both Konoha and the Uchiha clan. But okay, we've made a connection between a Japanese deity and the motivations of Fugaku. What does Bishamon do? Well, it protects, but bloodlessly, to a degree. See, I theorize that Bishamon was actually a genjutsu that imparted Fugaku's will on whoever he casted it upon. And this genjutsu operates differently from your standard genjutsu. See, this genjutsu would operate very similarly to how we believe that Sarada's genjutsu ability will work. It won't play with your 5 senses, but instead your perception of reality. And now that's not to say that the walls are gonna start bleeding or your hands are gonna become snakes. No, instead what this genjutsu will do is force you essentially to fight for Fugaku's side, or to fight for whatever Fugaku believes is right, making you in essence a soldier to his cause. And this is reflective of all of the things that Fugaku wants to accomplish. See, Bishamon is technically the protector of all gods and warriors, meaning that in the moment that Fugaku would have awoken this MS during the Third Great Shinobi World War, the true manifestation of Bishamon's will would be to protect everybody, enemies included. And while obviously Fugaku's loyalties align with Konoha and the Uchiha, the usage of this ability would allow Fugaku to end battles bloodlessly, while also ensuring that he came out the victor. And as Fugaku continually used this genjutsu on people, he would grow an army that was larger and larger and would gain more people that were under his protection. And Fugaku would become the leader of a loyal army whose entire purpose was to punish the guilty. But I know what you're saying, this doesn't sound particularly wicked, but think about it within the context of the ninja world. In a world so dedicated to making sure your comrades come out alive, what could be worse than to battle your own comrades? What if the real reason that Fugaku was given a run on site order is because if he made eye contact with you, you were adopted to the Konoha family? Now that's not to say that Fugaku would bring all these people he placed under genjutsu back to Konoha with him, because once again, that's not where his loyalties align. However, what I am saying is that Fugaku, upon placing people under this genjutsu, would force those people to battle against their own comrades, ensuring that the people he brought into combat with him wouldn't have to battle, winning a battle bloodlessly, at least as it applies to Konoha and the Uchihas he brought with him. And this ability applies outside of the confines of the Third Great Shinobi World War, as through the usage of this ability, Fugaku would be able to launch a significantly less bloody coup against Konoha, so long as he was able to entrance Konoha's upper ranks using this ability. And considering the fact that we're hypothesizing that Sarada will have a Genjutsu ability that operates similar to this, in that she'll have a Genjutsu ability that's able to undo any brainwashing and make people see reality as she perceives it, and that is her grandfather after all. If Sarada does end up having a Genjutsu ability like that, it speaks to the paternal lineage of MS abilities. Not to mention that Fugaku's complete and utter assurance that he could control Kurama may speak to this being his ability, even though the MS is canonically said to be able to control the tailed beasts. But what do I know? There's only so much information. I could be completely off base, but I don't think I am, because sometimes a little information used correctly is all you need to find the answer. But what do you guys think Fugaku's MS ability is? Do you think he even has an MS in the first place? Tell me in the comments below. While you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Up next, if Naruto were to have an MS, what would it be? That's actually not a bad idea.